When her husband Charles was shot and killed by her brother in her home, she seemed unfazed. When her children went missing, she seemed unconcerned. When she was arrested and extradited, she never seemed to care. And when she was brought into court charged with conspiring to murder her children, she didn't cry. Vallow Daybell is now a convicted child killer, part of a conspiracy connected to her husband, Chad, the alleged prophet. For years, we've been covering this story and calling Vallow the alleged doomsday cult mom. Tonight, as she gets ready to be sentenced, we take a closer look at the people around her. Was this really a cult? Then, we take a look at her next murder trial, the shooting death of her prior husband, Charles, in Arizona, and the mysterious death of her brother, Alex, who has been implicated in the murders and who had a very unorthodox relationship with Vallow, as our in-depth coverage of the doomsday cult killer cases continues.
I'm Vinny Politan. Thank you for joining us here on Closing Arguments. And we're going to talk about the doomsday cult killer tonight, Vallow Daybell, Vallow Daybell, whatever you want to call her. The story's not over. It's far from over. First, in her original trial where she was convicted, she still needs to be sentenced. She's going to try to get a new trial. All of that is happening this week. In the meantime, she has other charges that are pending, plus the charges against her husband, Chad. So there's a lot more to talk about. And one of the issues that I want to address tonight is the concept of a cult. And when I think of cults, the first name that comes to my mind is Charles Manson, who was definitely a cult leader. I don't think anyone can argue he wasn't a cult leader. The evil that he prescribed and what he did. I mean, it turns out he was just a frustrated guy who couldn't get a record deal, right? He was a musician, couldn't get a record deal. But somehow, some way, back in the 60s, started this cult, got these followers, and turned them into murderers. Still talking about that story today, as those murderers are trying to get out, and one of them likely will get out on parole. Another one that comes to mind from my lifetime is Jim Jones, who was absolutely a cult leader. This is the guy who literally got people to drink the Kool-Aid. That saying is a result of what happened to his cult. People drank the Kool-Aid. They all died, more than 900 of them. Absolutely a cult leader. Keith Raniere, this is one that's a little more contemporary. You may or may not know him. Did you see the show about this cult called NXIVM? Which was supposed to be some sort of self-help kind of organization, but it turns out that he gets convicted, serving 120 years for sex trafficking. And like many cult leaders that we've seen, a lot of what he did was to be able to have sex with lots and lots of women. And he too, I would call him a cult leader. I saw the documentary, I followed the trial as well. And now the question is for Chad Daybell. Was he an actual cult leader? We're going to examine that question. I mean, from my perspective, I'm not an expert on any of this. I'm just calling it, you know, kind of as someone who's followed and covered some of these cases. But there was an angle where he's using this power to get people to do things, if you believe the prosecution's case. He's also ending up sleeping with someone who's not his wife. Is he an actual cult leader? So we're going to take a look at some of this. So let's start by listening to one of the witnesses from Vallow Daybell's trial, Audrey Baratiero, who was connected and would be, if you believe this was a cult, would be one of the members of this cult. She clearly was someone who looked up to and followed Chad Daybell. Let's take a listen.
So in the summer of 2019, you were still a fan of his, a follower. Is that fair to say?
I thought that he had information and was doing good things, yes, at that time.
Because you went to his seminars, you went to his conferences, you bought his books, you've messaged him on Facebook, you called him on the telephone, and you texted with them, right?
He contacted me on Facebook, but yes, the rest.
So you thought, this is some spiritual leader, I need to follow him. Is that right?
At that time, I thought that he was someone who could help understand.
And because you were following him, is it safe to say that other ladies wanted to follow him too?
That could be the case.
Like Lori Vallow.
Yes.
Like Melanie Gibb.
Yes.
Like Zulema Pastinas.
Yes.
Yes, Chad had followers, but are they following him as a cult leader, a spiritual leader, a prophet? Like, where's that line? How do we figure out exactly what the dynamics are here? Because this will be crucial in his trial, obviously, and perhaps in the appeal of Vallow Daybell. So let's bring in our guest joining us tonight in Los Angeles, California, senior reporter for DailyMail.com, Caitlin Becker. Also joining us, cult expert, trial expert, witness, and author of Cults Inside and Out, Rick Alan Ross is with us tonight. So, Caitlin, how would you describe the people around Chad Daybell, the so-called prophet, the so-called leader here?
Well, Vin, I would describe him as acolytes. That's the easiest word I could put around them. They listened to what he said, they respected what he told them, and they believed some really far-fetched things. And when it comes to the question of cults, I actually have a really good in-depth video that we just published this week about cults and what constitutes a cult and how cults form on dailymail.com. And something that I found was a commonality in some of these destructive cults is the separation of people from their ability to do critical thinking and from anyone in their life that would encourage them to think critically or question the teachings. And we saw that play out through the Lori Vallow trial when all of these different women got on the stand and talked about how they began isolating themselves from their usual groups and spending all of their time with people like Lori, with people like Alex. I mean, one of them even married Lori's brother. So I absolutely constitute this as a cult. Rick
Alan Ross, where does that line drawn between someone who's maybe a charismatic spiritual leader, someone who may be a religious leader, someone who is, just a motivational type of person who has followers, versus someone who becomes, crosses that line into being a cult leader?
Well, Vinny, there are three core elements to define a destructive cult. They form the nucleus for virtually every definition that I've seen or read. And that is, number one, a totalitarian leader who is the defining element and driving force of the group. Someone who cannot be questioned, who becomes an object of worship. And then two, that leader uses identifiable thought reform techniques, what we call brainwashing, to gain undue influence and shut down critical thinking. And then finally, if the leader is destructive, that leader is hurting people. And that varies by degree from group to group. So there can be a leader who simply wants money or free labor, or there can be one like Chad Daybell who wants to kill people, to eliminate them and control his group more completely. I think Chad Daybell checks that list. He cast himself as a prophet of doom. He had his books. God was revealing the truth through him, much like David Koresh or Jim Jones, who you mentioned. And like Keith Raniere, he wasn't very charismatic. He was kind of a bland character. He didn't, therefore, draw a large following. But for those that he tricked and trapped in his web, they were, as you say, his acolytes. They became weaponized, and he used them and exploited them. And of course, tragedy is what came of that.
Let's listen to more of the testimony of Audrey Bartiero, because it gives us, she probably during the trial gave us the most insight into what was going on here.
And Chad and Lori, in their prior life, Chad told you that that they were friends with Jesus and walked in Palestine with Jesus.
Yes.
And Chad Daybell told you that you were married to Jesus.
Objection, Your Honor, relevance and beyond the scope.
Overruled.
Yes, he did.
And so what was your name being married to Jesus?
He said Joanna.
Joanna? So when Chad Daybell told you that in a previous life your name was Joanna and you had been married to Jesus, what did you think of that?
At the time, I thought it could be true because I trusted him.
You thought Chad Daybell is telling me about my past. He can probably predict the future too.
Yeah.
Because he was writing books about the end of the world. He was telling people who they were in prior lives, great people, not losers, and that gave you a feeling of, I'm somebody, right?
Yes.
Kaylin, what, after learning everything that we've learned here and what you've independently researched in this entire case, what do you think the end game was for Chad Daybell?
I think it was money. Truly, I think it was money and control. With all of the crimes that Lori Vallow has gone down for and the ones she's still currently facing, they all came back to one common thread, and it was so that Chad and Lori didn't have to work and that their lifestyle would be funded. It is so sad and trite to think it would come down to something like that and all of these people would lose their lives because of it, but I do think it was as simple as money.
Rick, what are your thoughts about Chad plus Lori, right? I mean, we've seen like Charles Manson sleeping with everybody, you know, a lot of the David Koresh sleeping with everybody. Chad, it seems like his sole focus was Lori. Is that unusual, or is that similar to other cult leaders?
Well, I think that Chad was cultivating something like a polygamist family. I mean, by telling the witness that we just listened to that she was Joanna in a previous life, married to Jesus, and that he was a Jesus figure, I think that he was cultivating a kind of polygamist harem. It was a small cult, but he was manipulating each individual through, as Caitlin said, social isolation. And by feeding into maybe Lori's narcissism and her desire to be important, to be the center of attention. I mean, cult leaders find your weaknesses and they drill into them and exploit them. And I think Chad Daybell may have not been a great speaker or particularly charismatic, but he was adroit at identifying people's weaknesses and preying on them. And as Caitlin said, insurance money was the lubricant for this whole thing. I mean, he wanted the money from Charles Vallow. He wanted the money from Brandon Boudreaux. He wanted whatever money he could get from the two children's income through Social Security or whatever. I mean, the man killed his wife, it appears, to get the insurance money from her initially, which financed them going to Hawaii. So there's no question that he was greedy, that he was targeting people to gain wealth and you know, not work a job. I think Tammy Daybell was increasingly skeptical about his ability to earn a living through his books, which were not quite that popular. And so he no longer could be her hero. And so he wanted to be Lori Vallow's God.
And much like Charles Manson couldn't get the big record deal, Chad Daybell was not going to get a big book deal. These are all self-published things that he was throwing out there. Let's take a listen to one other member of this cult, Zulema Pastanez, who is the husband of the wife of Alex Cox. They got married shortly before he died, but she was clearly in the inner circle.
What was Melanie Gibbs' gift?
She was a caliber.
Okay. What was your gift?
Chad said that I was my gift was the elements.
What does that mean?
To be able to work with the elements.
What does gatherer mean?
Gathering people who were awake.
Okay. What does awake mean?
Awake to the signs, aware of the times, and aware of the things that are to come prior to the second coming.
And these were gifts identified or described for you by Lori and Chad?
Yes.
Okay. Did Lori tell you this, or did Chad? Or
Chad.
both? Chad. Okay. What was Serena? What was her gift?
Chad said that she was a very powerful goddess.
Okay. What about Melanie Boudreau? I think you call her Melly, but Melanie Boudreau. What was her gift?
I don't remember.
Did Lori ever talk to you, or Lori and Chad ever talk to you about how long they expected JJ to live?
Lori had said that he was going to have a very short life. And then in a meeting that we had at Lori's house in early August
Of 2019?
He, Chad, said that JJ was going to have a very short life, that he was going to, the reason why he was going to live a short life was because he was going to come right back as Colby's child.
And to your knowledge, did Alex believe this?
Alex, yes, but Alex believed everything they told him.
Caitlin, this is interesting, because now that I'm thinking about it, right? Everyone in this cult is a woman except for Chad and Alex, Lori's brother.
That is something that I think goes to what Rick was saying earlier about how it looked like he was maybe trying to create this kind of polygamist harem, for lack of a better word, with these people, and using Alex to be sort of the strong arm of the cult. And I think when you listen to Zulema's testimony, you can sort of see just how subtle and nefarious these destructive cults work, because you have a group of women who desperately need to belong to something, and they're being told they're special in these divine ways. So then when you hear something like the children's lives are going to end early, you have to believe that too, because if you want to believe that what they said about you, that you are special, then you have to also believe the other things they say about the things that they're predicting for the future. And that's how they roped them in.
Rick, there was also the attempt on Brandon Boudreau's life, and that would have made Melanie a widow, right? So how do you think Chad could have convinced Lori to allow other women into his bed?
I think that may have been his agenda ultimately, and that Lori didn't completely understand it. But then what happens in destructive cults is it's if you will, it's brainwashing by increments. And the demands of the group increase as you become more and more enthralled, more and more under the control of the leader. So I think that Alex Cox, in my opinion, was the weapon of choice, and that Lori had great influence over her brother, and that he became an executioner. And that Chad had more or less told the group that by gathering together in Rexburg, they were in a place that they would reckon with the end of the world. And in that sense, he was pulling them into an isolated position there where he could manipulate them more easily. And I think, though, that Lori, of course, there's very little sympathy for her. And certainly, as she spends the rest of her life in prison, she's going to find that women in prison despise mothers who kill their children, and they don't do very well in prison. But I think that the primary person, the person most responsible for this tragedy, I have to say is Chad Daybell. It was his plan, his agenda. He pulled them together and manipulated them in the way that he did. And he convinced them that JJ and Tylee were possessed and that their spirits were gone and that the only freedom they could have was if they were killed. And I think if Lori did not believe that, she would not have cooperated. I talked to the grandparents early on, and they said Lori was a good mother and that they were shocked by the way that she was behaving and neglecting the children.
Rick Allen Ross, Cults Inside Out is the book. Thank you so much. Always great to have you on the program. Your insight is amazing.